Good morning, friends, or good afternoon. Wow, it's been a day already, hasn't it? This is Lindsay Cross, Government Relations Director with Florida Conservation Voters, and I wanted to give you all an update on where we are with the toll roads, the as we call it, the roads to ruin process, because there's a lot of things that have been happening in the past few weeks. I know that I came to you a couple weeks ago when we had concerns about webinars that again were being fast tracked by the Department of Transportation, and just our concerns with that. So, as a little background, again, Florida Conservation Voters is one of the steering committee members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, which includes around 90 businesses and organizations from around the state, including those in rural communities, people who are concerned about the future of our state and what these toll roads, potentially 330 new miles of roads, will do to our wildlife, our water supply, our rural communities, and very importantly, our taxpayer dollars. As you know, we're in the middle of a global health and economic pandemic right now, and we're also seeing people expressing their needs to see a more just and equitable future. So those are really critical things that we're dealing with right now, and there is urgency in addressing those things. On the other hand, there really is no urgency in destroying the natural and rural communities that we have in our state, and we feel that these MCORS processes have been fast tracked, and we really need to put the brakes on them right now. So again, we just came off of the last of round 3 of webinars that DOT has been having. And as an organization and as a coalition through the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, we have respectfully asked DOT to put a halt on these. We've gone about that a few ways and working in coordination with partners. So I first wanted to share that in ways for you to be engaged in those efforts. First of all, as Florida Conservation Voters, we have started a petition to DOT asking them to put a halt on the webinars. And one of our main concerns is not that that government should not continue to engage in projects. Of course, we're all trying to work from home and navigate in this safely during this COVID-19 pandemic. But this is the type of thing that really requires meaningful public participation, and having a webinar where you don't have that face-to-face interaction just is not the same as having a meaningful participation through an in-person meeting. One of the things that was the focus of the webinar today was the need for broadband. And we know even more than ever that having access to broadband is becoming just something that we can't live without as Floridians. Estimates from some of the people on the panels was suggesting that about 5 to 6% of our population in Florida does not have access to broadband right now, and that's really hampering the ability of people to work from home, to educate their children, and engage in things like Zoom calls and ways to be in touch with their family members. So that is something that we of course believe is something that needs to be a priority, but it does not need to be coupled with this huge infrastructure project, which is the MCORS toll roads. So I'm going to really quickly drop in this petition that we've started. We've got over 1,300 people that have signed our petition asking DOT to put the brakes on this toll roads process. When this first round of webinars was announced back in April, we saw that there were significant issues with the technology. There was a success rate of only about 20% of the people who wanted to provide public comment who were actually able to give that public comment. So that's very dismal. And we know that there was frustrations for many people who waited for hours to share their concerns and were not able to get through. In response to that, through the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, we looked at whether there were violations to things that impede public participation. And a group called the First Amendment Foundation actually looked through some of the Florida statutes and sent a formal letter to DOT on March 28th actually requesting that DOT halt the webinars because of the issues with the technology, which precluded some interested persons from being able to participate, that they believe that is in violation of our Sunshine Law. That is something that's really important, the government in the sunshine. That means that elected officials are not making decisions on critical things such as our health and our welfare and how we budget our state or our local dollars without input from the public and without doing it in a public forum. So we take those type of violations, which we see are, first and foremost, guaranteeing how we are able to organize and communicate with our elected officials. We see that is a very serious problem. So we support the letter that the First Amendment Foundation sent to DOT's Secretary Kevin Thibault, again on March 28th, pulling out some of those questions about the webinar process itself. DOT has come back with a response and saying that this has encouraged even more people to participate. But I would say sometimes there's a difference between quantity and quality. Many of the comments that you're able to get are you just kind of like, I'm speaking into a computer screen right now and don't know who's on the other side of it. It's like this, but instead of being able to look at a smiling face, you're looking at a countdown of your 3 minutes time. So, and there's no response from the task force members or DOT. It's simply, here's your name, here's your time, and get in and get out. So again, we would appreciate if DOT put the halt on these webinars and any of the task force meetings until they can do it in a way that guarantees that meaningful public participation. Speaking of the broadband, the people who these toll roads, the backyards that they're going to go through, are the people who are struggling to get broadband right now. And those are the exact same people who probably are not able to participate in these webinars for that same reason, that they don't have broadband connectivity. So to have this tied so intrinsically with a multi-billion-dollar project, we just feel is irresponsible. We would suggest that the legislature in the next session make it a priority to find ways to bring broadband and this type of infrastructure to the rural communities, but to decouple it from the MCOR's toll roads process. Speaking of that, there was a few pieces of legislation that Governor DeSantis signed just on Tuesday that actually helped to support and kind of get us deeper into this MCOR's process. One of them is specifically related to broadband, and that is House Bill 696. That's putting $5 million of money into broadband development for the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. They're also tasking the Department of Economic Opportunity with kind of developing a broadband plan for our state. So those things may be things that could be done independent of this toll roads process. Another piece of legislation that was signed that is problematic for several reasons is SB 7018. That is an essential state infrastructure bill. That bill started as a really great electric vehicle charging station bill from Representative Dan Daley over in the Miami area. Unfortunately, that bill was kind of subsumed and co-opted and merged into a larger infrastructure bill that included some amendments that do some things that are really challenging for our natural systems. One of the provisions in that bill is that there would be a preference for staging emergency staging sites in rural communities and places along multi-use corridor intersections, locations, and in communities of 200,000 persons or less, which categorizes many of the counties within the 3 MCOR study areas. Again, as reference, the Southwest Central study corridor would go from Collier County, the Naples area, up to Polk County. The Suncoast connector would go from Citrus County up into Georgia, and then the Northern Turnpike County, which is a smaller one, would essentially link those two together. So that's a 4-county area, including Citrus, Levy, Gilchrist, and Marion counties. Hope I have those right. So again, the Essential State Infrastructure Bill, which was signed by Governor DeSantis on Tuesday, would prioritize those emergency charging stations, and I think I'm getting my terms confused a little bit. Those emergency staging sites in some of these rural counties along these MCOR studies areas. It also has an incredibly damaging provision in there that allows for really the exploitation of conservation easements that are owned and managed by the Department of Department of Ag and Consumer Services, which would essentially allow private or public utilities or linear facilities, which could include roads, to be developed through some of our conservation easements if the owner of the land voluntarily negotiates that with the public or private utility themselves. What's concerning is that FDACS, as the owner of the easement, would be removed from those discussions, and there would be limited compensation to the state, only the loss of value of that land, but not the loss of the ecosystem services. So again, two pieces of legislation that were recently signed that are concerning, and we'll be looking at ways to kind of counteract that in the next legislative session. A couple other things that have been happening. Of course, our state budget really is in limbo right now. A significant part of our budget comes from from sales tax, and we know that with the shutting down of our economy and just getting back into some of the earlier stages of our reopening, that we have taken a hit. It will probably be in the billions of dollars. We don't know when the legislature will come back to revisit the budget and take a more realistic approach of what our revenue is and therefore what we can be spending. What we do know is that there's a significant amount of money appropriated for the MCORS process, and members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, as well as other businesses and concerned organizations in the state, 80 in total, sent a letter to Governor DeSantis just last week asking him to take the $90 million from the fiscal year 2021 budget and reallocate that from the MCORS process and put that directly into the relief that we're going to need for our health and economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We think that is just the right thing to do. We think it's more important that we're taking care of some of our immediate needs and looking after the welfare of our Floridians right now. So again, I dropped in a press release about the letter that was transmitted to the governor. We hope that he takes a close look at that and other letters from organizations that are asking that the governor reallocate some of the funding and make sure that our Floridians are being taken care of. So getting back to this broadband idea of taking care of the people in the rural communities, we think it's imperative that we find solutions for these broadband needs now and decouple it from the MCORS process. Things like the broadband and the emerging technologies are really fun to talk about, and they're kind of like the gift wrapping on a present that you don't really like your Aunt Jade gives you this hand-me-down sweater. It's horrible, but it's got a really pretty wrapping on it. You still have this sweater that you're going to be expected to wear every time you see her. So that's kind of how these things are, and they become this carrot that gets dangled in front of these rural community members, and this promise that a lot of the times doesn't come to fruition. So if you let us use this land, if we can create this, this toll road through your community, we'll give you all these great things. And there's no guarantee that those great things are happening. There was discussion about the cost and how there could be cost savings of laying fiber networks to support broadband during the construction of a large toll road like the MCORS. That is an option that's being heavily touted by the private industries, those groups that are involved with providing internet, because of course it is going to help them to be more financially profitable. Of course, we are always looking for ways for government and private corporations to work collaboratively, but we do not need to be subsidizing for-profit gains through these type of roads. So some discussions was that potentially it could cost right now, if you wanted to go into some of these areas and lay this fiber network, could cost maybe $100,000 a mile. So that sounds like a pretty significant amount. But if you look at the figures of how much it would cost to create 330 miles of toll roads, if you look at the Wekiva Parkway in the central Florida Orlando area, which is really touted as kind of the gold standard of how to build a new road with appropriate wildlife crossings and elevated roadways to protect some of the hydrologic, the water flow, and wildlife usage. Those get into the cost of potentially $64 million a mile. So if you do the math, it's pretty shocking. You could put in, and someone probably can fact check me on this, but if you spent $100,000 a mile times 330 miles, that's $33 million. That's about a third of what we've allocated for MCORS in this year's budget. Okay, you take that and you think of $64 million times 330, you're getting up into the $20 billion mark. So is that really how we want to be spending our taxpayer dollars? In my discussion today, first of all, I asked DOT, as I have in this round of webinars, which took place last Wednesday, this Tuesday, and again this morning. I respectfully asked DOT to put a halt on the webinar process and said that the discussions about things like broadband and technology really are a diversion, because what the task force members should be doing is talking about the true need and justification for these roads and how these roads could be financially viable. And we know those discussions aren't happening because they're not financially viable. It is not fair for people in other parts of the state to be subsidizing these roads, for us to be putting billions of taxpayer dollars into these roads that aren't proven to have a need and that many of the community members don't want. So those are just a few things that I wanted to share with you today. I see that there are a few comments, but not any questions yet. So if anyone has a question, I will do my best to answer it right now. Going back to some of the financial side of it, over the next 10 years, we're in our budget, there's already plans for about $1.1 billion to go towards this MCORS process. Again, the legislation states that the road building is supposed to begin in 2022 and that all of the construction is supposed to be finished by 2030. So that is an incredibly aggressive and frankly unrealistic timeline to build that amount of roadways, especially if it is designed to incorporate all of these extra things like water and sewer and broadband. That is an unrealistic time frame. What is more realistic is finding opportunities to support the broadband needs in our rural communities right now. So if you're telling someone, we're going to give you broadband, but just wait 10 years, think of the inequities that are there. And with some of the private investments, if it was profitable right now, some of those broadband opportunities may already be there. We also can't guarantee that if the fiber is laid and broadband is technically available, if those rural communities will have the economic means to afford that. Just because there's the option to bring sewer to a community doesn't mean that some of those lower income community members can afford to have a septic system switched over to sewer. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous to make these promises that may not be possible for these community members. But if we were investing some of that money instead in programs that are helping with some of the water quality needs, with accessibility to broadband to support people's ability to work from home and distance learning, those are admirable goals, and those are things that we should be taking a really close look at in the next the near term in the coming years. So there's a question from Deborah. Are more DOT webinars scheduled? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. There is a fourth round of webinars, which is scheduled for the week of June 22nd. And I believe that the DOT switched the schedule around a little bit because I have my handy paper calendar that I keep everything on, and some of the things change. So I'm going to drop in DOT's calendar of events right now. But as I understand it from my most recent examination, is that on Tuesday, June 23rd, the Suncoast Corridor will be having their webinar. On Wednesday, June 24th, will be the Southwest Central Corridor. And then on Thursday, June 25th, will be the Northern Turnpike. And the way that process works is that if you would like to attend one of the webinars, you have to register in advance through the DOT website. And if you would like to give public comments, there's a second step where you have to do that, and you need to do it by 5 o'clock the day before. Members of the No Roads to Ruin Steering Committee, I'll just note we are not directing people to attend these webinars right now because we have such serious concerns with how they've been run, that they are in violation of our sunshine law. And we really want to be cognizant and respectful of your time, because we don't think this is a meaningful way for you to participate, and it really is buying into the sham of the process that really has represented bad government from the start. Again, this whole thing was predicated by Senate Bill 7068 in 2019, which was a bill that was rushed through session. It was kind of the pet of Senate President Bill Galvano, and really has been rubber stamped. And we feel that these task force meetings are a way to validate a project that is not needed and that's going to have serious consequences to our water, our wildlife, the agricultural backbone that we have in our state, and will hit Floridians in their pocketbook, where it really hurts, and especially right now when we're trying to rebuild our economy in a safe and an equitable way. So let me look over at some other questions. Someone asked if there's many people that can't attend these during the daytime. Is it possible for the webinars to be a combination of these meetings? So the webinars, the recordings are available afterwards on DOT's website, or if you register and can't attend, I believe they email you a link for that, so you could go back and watch it. Again, that would preclude you from giving public comment if that's something that you felt called to do. The in-person task force meetings, the public comment period often started around 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon, so it was a little bit more conducive to people's schedule that would allow them to get there in person. And of course, no platform is going to work for everyone. Our concern, again, is that the interaction is very one way. It is very controlled by DOT and the panel members that they select to talk about some of these topics. And it's a bit of a diversion from the discussions about the real need, how we would pay for these roads, and the significant devastation that they would create. Those of you that have commented several times on the MCORs, what should you be doing right now? And that's an excellent question. One of the best things you can do, especially if you live in one of the study counties, is reach out to task force members individually. If there's someone who makes a comment that really resonates with you, I believe we can provide emails for folks, or let me just take a quick look But I believe it is possible to contact the task force members individually. Also, we would love for you to talk with your county commissioners about your concerns. One thing that we have seen that is very positive is that Levy County, which is in both the Northern Turnpike and the Suncoast Connector, their commission took a really bold stance and passed a resolution opposing the MCORs, the toll roads coming through their county. There has been interest or maybe efforts in other counties that haven't gotten to this step. But if you think that that is something viable in your county, we would absolutely encourage you to talk with your county commissioners. Of course, that has to be done within the Sunshine Guidelines, so you can't get a group of them together, but you can talk to them individually as long as you don't share what you've learned with the other ones. But talking within your community and with your elected officials about passing a no-build resolution. We understand that DOT would love for some communities to pass a pro-MCORS resolution, and we are trying our darndest to make sure that does not happen. So if you have other specific questions, you can reach out to us at FC Voters, our contact email address, and that will get directed to us. We have, of course, we've got emails that go out to people who are interested in the toll roads. I also just put my email address in there so you can send your questions to me. I'll make a personal phone call to you and we'll talk about a strategy. So Marion, hopefully that helped to answer your question a little bit. So there are some great community organizers in the Levy County area, and there's some signs that have been made that say no toll roads, and there are these bright magenta signs. I'm going to see if I can drop that into this chat box here. We'll see how my technology skills, but we're seeing those in areas within rural Florida. And if you're so moved, it would be great to get some printed up in your local community. Let's see what else. Taylor County property appraiser is being very secretive. Has any more info surfaced about the Petterfee boondoggle? Great question, Rhonda. So for those of you that are not familiar with kind of that backstory, Thomas Petterfee is a landowner in Florida who has significant portions of land in Taylor County, some within the Southwest Central area. He's also been a significant campaign contributor to Governor DeSantis. He will benefit financially very well if these roads are built. He has been working with a county in Taylor County to kind of mastermind a whole planned community there. So this was the idea of the billionaire boondoggle. I can't think of the term right now. Billionaire Boulevard, that's it. Kind of came out of that kind of uncovering of that. But I don't know what the latest developments are on that. So anyone who is a Taylor County resident, that would be great to see if you can dig more into that. Kim asked a question, what can you do if you're not in those counties? It really doesn't matter where in Florida you live because the impacts will be statewide. Just looking at the financial impact of these roads, whether you live in Northeast, South, Central, regardless of where you are in Florida, don't think that you won't be paying for these roads in some way, either through the general revenue or through tolls that you may pay living down in South Florida or Central Florida. So there is a fiscal impact to you. There's also going to be impacts to agricultural production, to water supply and quality, to our wildlife in those areas. And again, that impacts people across the state, whether you are able to see those beautiful places on a daily basis, or maybe just visit there from time to time. We think it's important for people to write short letters to the editors or op-eds sharing those concerns, and it's important to hear the voice of people outside of those corridor areas too, saying, this may not be in my backyard, but I stand with those in these rural communities and want to allow them the option of keeping that rural lifestyle. Some of our, when you hear from community members in places like Levy or Dixie County, time and time again, they're saying, we either moved here or have continued to live here by choice because we appreciate this lifestyle and this was a choice. And these roads will disrupt that lifestyle. They will bring more traffic, they will bring more pollution. They're designed to bring the type of sprawling development that is not sustainable in our state and really changes the character of an area. So we think that that in this case, having that choice and being able to continue to lead that rural lifestyle, that is important. Let's see if there's any other questions. We're starting to get to the end of our 30 minutes, and I'm sure you all have other things to be doing today, but I appreciate those of you that are watching live. And this video will be available after we end on the Florida Conservation Voters Facebook page. So you'll be able to come back and watch it. Again, to reiterate, the third round of webinars was concluded today by DOT. Florida Conservation Voters has started a petition asking DOT to halt the webinars. That's available in the chat box. Again, the First Amendment Foundation has also sent a letter to DOT's Secretary Tebow asking that they halt the webinars because of the technical difficulties that prevented interested persons, that DOT should have immediately stopped the webinars when they knew that there was a problem like that. And by failing to do so, that was a violation of Florida's Sunshine Law. So there's a press release that links to the No Roads to Ruin coalition page. Would encourage you to spend some time on that web page. So many resources there, articles, fact sheets that you can find there, list of organizations and businesses that are involved. If you are a business owner or involved with an organization, no matter how big or small, we would encourage you to join the No Roads to Ruin coalition. Or at least sign up on the website and like the Facebook page. We've been working hard to provide resources to community members. We know that these type of things happen best when they happen on a grassroots level with the communities, and we're seeing great momentum in some of these communities, and we'd love to see more of this happen organically, and we're here to support all of those efforts. So again, that First Amendment Foundation letter, the letter to Governor DeSantis just last week, asking him to put the money from the MCOR's roads, the $90 million in this year's budget, into COVID-19 pandemic relief. It's an urgent need that Floridians have right now. There's no urgency in destroying more of natural Florida and our rural communities. Again, as a recap, 2 bills were signed by the governor on Tuesday that lend support for MCORs, both which are problematic, and we need to see more legislation next year that is making these MCORs roads more difficult and starting to expose this for the fraud and the sham that it is. If we really value bringing broadband to our rural communities, we will make those investments now, and we'll be spending millions of dollars rather than billions of dollars, and we can do it in a more expeditious way. We can continue to find opportunities for public-private partnerships, but we do not need them to be coupled with this larger infrastructure bill. So those are, I think, just the last points that I wanted to make. Again, stay engaged with us. Another last question: are the organizations represented on the task forces gagged in in regards to their advocacy? Interesting question. I actually, one of my first op-eds about this was questioning the membership in the task forces, because the bulk of the members are either members of agencies that receive state funding, or they are kind of fall into that special interest category. They're lumped into the community or nonprofit category, but I think you would be hard pressed to think that the Chamber of Commerce or the Internet Association, that's not the right term for it, but that those represented a community or a nonprofit organization, that in that way that we think of who is looking out for the interest of our communities. So someone who receives funding from the state government may be less likely to speak up, and someone who has a financial stake in this, of course, is going to be more likely to speak in support of this. There are several environmental organizations on each of the task forces. By and large, they've done a great job of raising issues. We did hear this morning on the Southwest Central corridor group that there's more questions, and task force members saying, how do we decouple these important things like broadband infrastructure from this MCORS bill, and make it so that building a toll road is not a necessity for bringing some of these important infrastructure needs to these rural areas. All right, we do think that DOT should quit, and with that, I'm also gonna say it's quitting time for me on this live update. Again, thank you so much for participating. You can continue to access the comments and the links. Email me if you want to be more engaged with this, or have task force members or county commissioners that you would like to reach out to, or your other municipal leaders, city leaders. The city of Cedar Key has also taken a stance against these toll roads. So it doesn't have to be the counties, it can be city governments as well. So let's stay engaged. We got a few more months of this fight. We're gonna keep doing it, and I'll be here to provide you updates throughout the process. So stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. Bye.